Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Chris here. Today we're going to be watching this video. The $1 trillion debt is a threat to all Australians. That does sound pretty scary. So let's get into it. Full video will be linked below.
Thankfully, there was an example of somebody who was willing to take it right up to the Treasurer, and well done to my mate Andrew Clennell. But I'll get to that in a second. But first, Jim Chalmers, just how much money will the Australian federal government, of you as the Treasurer, owe to the rest of the world?
$1 trillion, $1 trillion.
And what did you say when you thought it was the Liberal Party who predicted that years after they were in office, we would get to this number?
This is a Prime Minister with a budget with $1 trillion in debt and not enough to show for it, because it's absolutely riddled with rorts and riddled with waste and mismanagement. He's got a record of weak economic growth, stagnant wages, weak business investment, weak productivity right across the board.
And what's Australia going through right now? Weak growth, cost of living crisis. The government is like spamming out taxes that are just going to tax everyone and primarily affect the lower to middle class. And have we seen much like actual infrastructure being built over the years? Nah. So, I don't know. Bit of a hypocrite there on that one, but that's politics for you.
As I say, Andrew Clennell, he confronted the Treasurer with $5, and that piece of footage is going to last for a very long period of time, and you could tell Jim Chalmers isn't not liking it. But good on Andrew for pointing that out, because it was, again, the central fallacy, the bribe, the BS, to distract from the real story, the $1 trillion story, the decades and decades and decades of budget deficits to come. Well, Andrew is famous for the questions that he asks at press conferences. And there was a big one today with the Treasurer inside the Great Hall of Parliament House.
A budget that delivers generational debt without the generational dividend. $1 trillion in debt and growing, deficits as far as the eye can see, but barely anything else designed to survive beyond the election. And that's the biggest risk in this budget. Instead of laying out an economic vision, the government focuses on managing political perception. Both of those were said by Jim Chalmers in May 2021. You've just delivered a budget which forecasts a decade of deficits. $1 trillion debt, the next four deficits of $179 billion. My question, Treasurer, is do you feel like a hypocrite today?
Middle stump.
He definitely should. Definitely should. Like, if you're trying to get into a house, it's hard enough as it is right now. Prices are 13 times the average median salary, and yet you go to work, you get taxed 30 to 40%. You then pay tax 10% on cost of goods, your GST. Then you pay, potentially when they add it, this carbon tax, which if you don't know about it, I'll link it below. But there's a carbon tax that they're coming out with to try and bring the country closer to net zero, do their part for the world. Cool. But all it's going to do is hurt the average Australian. Like, this government's just, I find it funny that the people that mostly need the government to help them are the people that are getting most screwed over by the government. And yet people still think the government's going to come in and save them. Like, if you want to be able to afford a house, you want to be able to afford groceries, then going to work for 40 hours a week at a middle, a medium wage is not going to get you far in life. You need to be working 50, 60 hours a week if you want to get ahead in this country anymore. And I've said that so many times, but yeah, is it fair? Well, probably not. If you go back 20 years ago, could you get ahead on 40 hours a week? Potentially, I think you could. If there's some older people in the audience, make sure to comment down below if you couldn't, but I believe you probably could. 20 years ago, on 40 hours a week, you could probably survive comfortably. Now you could survive on 40 hours a week. Barely. You're struggling. Especially if you have a family. A family, you're kidding if you're only working 40 hours a week. Unless you are, high up in your job, you got a really good job, you got a really good degree. Maybe 40 hours a week is enough. But when you're starting out, like a lot of young people like myself, when we're starting out, it's 40 hours a week is nowhere near enough.
Middle stop, off to the pavilion, no review. Now, you would think that somebody would be mildly chastened by their own words being repeated right back to them. But of course, Jim Chalmers, well, this was his answer to the question.
No, of course not, because central to the budget last night was an economic vision for the long term. Building Australia's future was a key element of the budget.
I repeat, the middle stump is still spinning behind the wicket, making its way towards the fence. That's how out and bowled out he was by that question. But, we just practice the pivot, right? And that might be charming when it comes to Donald Trump, but it is disgraceful when it comes to this bloke, because he paraded as something else. They paraded at the last election as the people who would do something about cost of living. Instead, cost of living went through the roof. In their first budget, they took $1,500 off 10 million workers with low to middle income tax offset, a guaranteed $1,500 tax return for 10 million workers, only to say, well, $25 a month when it comes to your power bill, $5 when it comes to a tax return in a year's time, or the ones that they want to add them to, like last year, were $12 a week for people earning $40,000. They spend more money on government advertising about the politics of what they are doing rather than spending it on things like making sure that we can feed the more than 3.7 million households, and that's just not people, households that don't know where the food's going to come from for the rest of the week. There was nothing in the budget to discuss anything about the almost 3 million people that are this close to homelessness. And small business, well, it got bashed around the head. One of the very few things that small business has been able to rely upon over the past few years is a thing called the instant asset write-off, meaning that if you buy something for your business, you can write it off against your tax. At the height of the pandemic, you were able to do this to up to $100,000. It meant that people were able to buy a car, claim it off their tax, and if all you do is drive around in your ute, that's really important. It then went back to $20,000, and under this budget, there is no reference to it going forward into the future. And just on that $1 trillion figure that Jim Chalmers...
Yeah, I want to go more over that. Just like a lot of the incentives that were there during COVID, they were good. They helped out. Obviously, they were to stimulate the economy, which is currently what we sort of need, right? We need small little things to stimulate the economy that isn't going to cause inflation, but I think it was like last quarter where it, 0.2% or something ridiculously low for 3 months of growth. That's all we had. That's barely moving. Now, is growth always good? Oh, probably not. You probably need some time to taper back to go back up. However, during that taper back, there should be, building a plan for the future, but there's nothing here. Like, it's just they take all your taxes, they waste money, and at the end of the day, that's the biggest problem. Like, the government is just, our taxes are just funding the government's mismanagement of our money. Like, and we're just getting taxed more and more and more, and there's no relief for people that are about to go homeless. And to those people that are about to go homeless, the only solution is you take it on yourself and you work your fucking ass off. And it's easy for me to say because I'm not in that situation. But what else are you going to do? You're going to go complain to someone else. The government's not listening to you. The government's not there to help you. Who's going to, right?
Now has to wear around his neck, not as like a gold medal, like the bloke he used to work for, Wayne Swan, is the world's greatest treasurer, but the bloke who took us into the $1 trillion black hole. Even when he was confronted with his own words, even after he did the pivot, he still found a way to blame the Liberals.
Their budget was weighed down by waste and rorts and missed opportunities, and what we've done is we've invested in the future of this country, building more homes, investing in lifelong learning, strengthening Medicare. And these are legacy items that we will leave behind whenever we finish up.
I will have to say, I don't know if the Liberal Party's actually any better, but at the moment, the Labor Party doesn't seem like I don't know, like what did they really do much the last 3 years other than make everyone hurt more? How much of it can the government control? I don't know. But it's not good at the moment, and it probably won't be better in 3 years. So, be interesting to see. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.